For years, Buckingham Palace said nothing. No press conferences, no statements, no responses to the interviews, the documentaries, the memoirs, or the carefully timed media tours. The world watched and waited and wondered whether the crown would ever respond to the most public royal departure in a generation. And now, quietly, without a single camera present, without a single spokesperson reading from a prepared statement, the palace has moved. Final documents. Processed. Filed. Permanent. And for Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor, two children who never chose any of this, the consequences are as real as they are irreversible. Welcome to Royal Report Daily. Today we are telling the complete story of how the oldest institution in the world applied rules written over a century ago to the children of its most famous modern departure. This is not a story about scandal or drama. It is a story about protocol, about documentation, about a rule book that has governed royal identity since 1917 and has never once bent for anyone. Let's start at the source. The rule book. To understand what just happened, you need to understand why it was always going to happen. And that means going back to 1917. The world was at war. Empires that had stood for centuries were collapsing. The Russian royal family had just been swept from power. Monarchies across Europe were falling one after another. And inside Buckingham Palace, King George V recognized something with urgent clarity. Tradition alone would not protect the crown. Sentiment would not protect it. Popularity would not protect it. What was needed was law. Specific, enforceable, written law that answered one question with complete precision. Who is truly royal? He signed the letters patent of 1917. And inside it, he established 3 requirements that every royal child must meet. No exceptions. No workarounds. No special cases. First, legitimate royal bloodline, formally recognized by the crown. Second, official birth registration by the royal household itself. Not a press release. Not a family announcement. The crown had to document and claim the birth through its own official process. Third, baptism into the Church of England. Registered, witnessed, officially recorded. Not as ceremony. As legal documentation of a child's formal connection to the institution the crown is built upon. These rules held for over 100 years without exception. Every royal birth, from Prince William to Prince George to Princess Charlotte to Prince Louis, followed them precisely. Perfect documentation from day one. The system worked because everyone worked within it. Until 2019. Until Archie. And the first crack appeared. Archie's birth certificate. On the surface, Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor's arrival in May 2019 looked exactly as it should. Proud parents. Global attention. A new royal baby welcomed into the world with smiles and carefully coordinated photographs. But inside the paperwork, inside the document specifically designed to establish a child's identity permanently and beyond dispute, something happened that set off quiet alarm bells inside palace walls. Archie's birth certificate was initially completed with his mother's full legal name. Rachel Meghan Markle. Standard. Correct. Unremarkable. Then the document was changed. Her full legal name was removed and replaced with a title. Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. Birth certificates are not editable documents. They are not social media profiles or press releases that get updated as circumstances change. They are permanent legal records. Changes to them require formal processes and official justification. When a royal birth certificate is altered after initial registration, it attracts serious attention from the people inside the institution whose job it is to care about exactly these things. Meghan said publicly that the palace had pressured her into the change. Palace staff said Meghan had requested it herself. Neither side produced documentation that definitively settled the dispute. Both maintained their positions. And in that back and forth, something happened that mattered far more than who was actually right. Doubt entered a royal legal record. In the world of the crown, doubt in official documentation is not a minor inconvenience to be managed with a communication strategy. A royal birth record with contested alterations is a foundational problem. It is a crack. And in an institution built entirely on the integrity of its records, cracks do not stay small. The palace noted it, filed it, and continued to wait. Lilibet's birth. By the time Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor arrived in June 2021, the palace's strategy had already fully formed. And that strategy was deliberate, sustained silence. The world expected the familiar picture. Royal physicians, An official announcement carrying the palace seal. The crown formally welcoming its newest member into the official record. None of it came. Lilibet's birth was announced through a warm, carefully worded press release issued by Harry and Meghan's personal office. From California, thousands of miles from any palace wall, any royal registrar, any official crown involvement of any kind. No palace seal, no royal household confirmation, no official documentation of the birth by the crown itself. Consider what this meant in the context of the letters patent. The second requirement George V established in 1917 is that the royal household itself must officially record and claim the birth. Not the parents. Not a private communications team. The crown. Lilibet's birth was never claimed by the crown in that way. She became the first Windsor relative in modern history to be introduced to the world with no formal crown involvement in the documentation of her arrival. And inside Buckingham Palace, that was not filed as a personal lifestyle choice or a cultural difference. It was documented as a departure from the foundational requirements that had governed every royal birth for over 100 years. The palace said nothing publicly. Because palace silence, as this entire story demonstrates, is not emptiness. It is the sound of an institution building its case. Quietly, methodically, without any need for drama. The baptism, then came the baptism. And this is where documentation problems became genuine legal consequence under the specific terms of the 1917 letters patent. Months after Lilibet's birth, Meghan spoke publicly about a baptism that had taken place in California. She described it with warmth and evident meaning. The ceremony was beautiful. The family gathered. A meaningful spiritual celebration. For most families, that is exactly what a baptism is. A personal, deeply meaningful event. For a royal child under the letters patent, it is a legal requirement. The third pillar George V established is not ceremonial. It is the formal moment a child is officially and legally connected to the Church of England. That connection has to be registered with the Church, documented, witnessed by appropriate officials, recorded in the Church's formal registers which connect to the broader legal framework of royal identity. According to sources familiar with church records, Lilibet's California baptism was never registered with the Church of England. The ceremony happened. The family was present. The moment was genuinely meaningful to the people in that room. But in the official record, the record the letters patent requires, it did not exist. This was not, in the palace's assessment, a misunderstanding. It was a failure to meet one of the three foundational requirements established by law over a century ago. And rather than strengthening Lilibet's connection to the royal institution, the unregistered ceremony confirmed the gap. It left her formally unconnected to the church the crown is constitutionally built upon. 3 requirements. 3 failures to meet them fully. The institution whose entire function depends on the integrity of its records had everything it needed. Harry's calls while all of this was developing in the documentation. Something more personal was happening privately. Harry understood, at some level, what was coming. And according to people familiar with the conversations that took place during this period, he reached back toward the institution he had walked away from with a desperation that speaks to how real the stakes felt to him. He made calls late at night, not polished or strategic, raw and emotional. He asked the palace to reconsider. He pushed for Archie and Lilibet to be formally recognized in the royal record. He argued that whatever had happened between him and the family, his children should not carry the consequences. His argument was rooted in blood. They were grandchildren of the king. They carried Windsor lineage. That had to count for something. The palace's response was consistent and unmoved. One official reportedly told him something that sources say stayed with him long afterward. The words were simple, direct, completely devoid of sentiment. This is not about emotion. This is about order, lineage, and the future of the crown. That sentence reportedly changed something fundamental in Harry's understanding of the situation, because it was not a threat designed to be countered or an argument designed to be negotiated. It was a statement of institutional fact. The crown was not going to be moved by personal appeals. It was going to apply the same rules it had applied consistently for over 100 years. To everyone. Without exception. Without apology. Harry realized what stepping back had actually meant. He had not simply walked away from royal duties. He had walked his children to the edge of the royal record. And the palace was completing the process of stepping them off it entirely. The final orders when the crown's decisions were formally processed and documented They came with the quiet efficiency the institution is known for. No cameras, no press conference, no opportunity for public appeal. The consequences for Archie and Lilibet were comprehensive and permanent. No royal titles. Archie would not be Prince Archie. Lilibet would not be Princess Lilibet. No ceremonial roles. No official duties. No position in the line of succession. No place in the permanent royal archives. No crown-funded security. In the world of royalty, a title is not decoration. It is a key. It opens doors that cannot be opened any other way. It writes a child into a story that is larger than any individual lifetime, larger than any media cycle, larger than any generation. Without that key, the connection to the Windsor legacy is severed, not as punishment, not as revenge, as the clean, precise application of rules that predate everyone involved by over a century. The Crown's real power here is what consistently gets underestimated when watching this story from the outside. The palace never needed to win the public argument. It never needed to respond to the Oprah interview or the Netflix documentary or the memoir or the podcast appearances. It never needed to match the Sussex media operation with one of its own, because the Crown's power was never in public relations. It was always in documentation, in records, in the patient, absolute certainty that the rule book would outlast the noise. While Harry and Meghan built their public narrative across years of media appearances, the palace sat still, waiting, watching, building the institutional record that would eventually matter more than all of it combined. The public narrative fades. Headlines move on. Documentaries get replaced by other documentaries. Memoirs get replaced by other memoirs. But the paperwork stays. The legal records stay. The institutional processes stay. And the Crown had been quietly, methodically completing those processes while the rest of the world was focused on the drama. The silence was not weakness. It was strategy. It was the sound of an institution doing exactly what it has been doing for 1,000 years, waiting for the right moment, and then applying the rules. What comes next? Archie and Lilibet will grow up loved. They will grow up in California with parents who clearly adore them. They will grow up with freedoms that most royal children never have. Freedom from obligation, from protocol, from a life lived entirely in the public eye of an institution that demands everything and forgives very little. That matters. It genuinely does. And no one watching this story should lose sight of the fact that at the center of it are two children who had no say in any of the decisions that shaped their early lives. But the pages of royal history, the pages that outlast everything, that historians and scholars and future generations will turn to when they want to understand the Windsor story, those pages will not carry Archie and Lilibet's names as royal children of the House of Windsor. Not because of who they are, because of documentation, because of a rule book written in 1917 that has never bent for anyone, because of 3 requirements that were not met. The absence is the statement. The silence is the verdict. The paperwork is the sentence. And in the world of the Crown, once the paperwork is done, the decision is forever. That is all for today here at Royal Report Daily. If you want to stay ahead of every development in this story and every move the royal family makes, subscribe to the channel right now and turn on your notifications. We cover everything the mainstream media glosses over. The royal world never stops moving, and we will be here every single time it does.